You are listening to the podcast That's Life in Sweden, or as we say in Swedish, Sånt är livet i Sverige, with me, your host, Lisa Åsimäki. Today I'm exploring the work and role of a learning designer. I have invited Natasha Hobbs, who works at the Swinburne University of Technology here in Melbourne as a learning designer. Welcome, Natasha, to the program.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you.
How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you.
And you had a nice weekend?
Had a lovely weekend, yes. Went and saw my son play football yesterday, and it was a beautiful day, very different to today, which is actually quite rainy in Melbourne.
Yes. So it's absolutely wonderful to have you with me on the program. And so I know you're a learning designer at Swinburne University, but could you please just share a little bit about your background and then about the role of the learning designer?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Lisa. I would actually firstly like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm speaking to you from today. The Wurundjeri people are part of the oldest living culture in the world and have been passing down knowledge on this beautiful land that they hold a deep connection to for thousands of years. They never ceded sovereignty, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. So I was actually born and educated in Melbourne myself, and as a white Australian, my ancestry on the timeline here is nowhere near as long as the Wurundjeri. But to give you some background to my career, I actually started in a different field to teaching altogether. After completing my Bachelor of Arts, I travelled through the UK and Europe, and I had so much fun over there. I came back and became a travel agent. And travel was such a fun, customer-focused industry that I stayed in it for many years before I went back and completed my Master of Arts in Tourism and transitioned to teaching tourism in higher education. And I was seriously considering taking the steps to complete a PhD, either in tourism or in education, essentially to further my teaching career, when someone suggested to me to have a look at learning design. I didn't even know that this job existed. But as soon as I did a little bit of research, I spoke to some learning designers who work commercially, not in a university. And then I completed a 3-week online MOOC called Transforming Learning Design meets Service Design through Deakin. I thought I was hooked. Sign me up. So I've since then completed a graduate certificate in digital learning leadership at Deakin, which really said to me that I'd hit on something that is a really good fit for me. Learning design and then I applied for this position at Swinburne, which I am in now. So you asked what is the role? So essentially the role of a learning designer is to support subject matter experts, so teaching academics at university or any other area. Actually, you'll find learning designers working in healthcare, government, large corporations, all sorts of places. And so what we do is we align learning objectives with either assessments or activities or content so that those learning objectives are met. In other words, we're constructing and aligning learning. And being a learning designer, really, it suits everything that I know about myself. And that's that I enjoy working in teams and building relationships with people, which are skills that I developed way back in the travel industry. And it also uses the knowledge that I've had from a decade of teaching, allowing me to practically think about how, when if I design a course or create some learning material, how it actually might play out in reality and actually work. So I really think it does help having some teaching experience, because it makes me empathetic to the teaching staff who I support, knowing that they've got so many competing priorities and between research and admin and their teaching loads. Yeah. I have to also say,
Yep.
being a student as well recently in learning design also helps me to think from a student's perspective in everything that I do. As I
Right.
really think it's important for learning designers to make that process of learning and teaching for students and teachers as seamless as possible.
So that brings me a very quick question about do you work with both students and teachers, or is it mainly teachers as a learning designer at the university?
Oh, well, that's actually a really good question. So I'm very much thinking about the students, but we work with teachers.
Right.
So and there is a lot of cross collaboration that goes on with the learning and support, learning academic support staff who assist with with students.
Mm-hmm.
But we essentially help teachers support students. And yeah.
Oh.
So
So you still need to have a bit of an understanding about student learning.
absolutely, we need to think about where this is going to and where the impact is going to be, which is definitely with the students.
Right. So how do you, as a learning designer, make the process of learning and teaching at Swinburne? You talk about seamless learning and teaching.
Well, I suppose in lots of ways, and so I suppose a bit of context. If I give you, let you know, so within Swinburne, I work with about 25 designers, technologists, and academics in a unit called the Learning Transformations Unit.
Mm.
So our goal is to build the capability and quality of teaching. So yeah, working with teachers. But to give you some examples of what we do, we often research and design and deliver professional development workshops. And this is where I met you, Lisa. You came to our
Yes.
Designing Educational Videos workshop.
I loved it.
And well, I suppose in this workshop, we emphasise that it might actually not be necessary to create your own educational videos. There might actually be some existing videos out there that are ready to match teachers' learning objectives. And will be ready and fit to use. So it has more to do with how you use the video. So I've run that workshop several times. The one that you came to was the most recent one, Lisa. But I've actually had some feedback from teachers from previous times when they've actually said to me that they thought that they actually had to, create their own videos to replace, say, traditional lectures. And they've really appreciated that this is not necessarily the case, and that they've been given the license to concentrate with their limited time on generating the discussion, creating the questions, and highlighting the points, and generally enhancing the points of learning around the video content. That's what came out for them. So I think that type of practical advice can be really helpful. And of course, in the second half of that workshop, we did look at how to actually design a video if that would support students better. But I think that's one example of how we try and make things easier for teachers and seamless for students as well. And I suppose that's one example of one of the workshops that we run, but we run a lot of others as well.
Yes. And I've been very fortunate because I have been able to participate in some of them. And I think it is such a wonderful way of getting ideas, because like you said, sometimes when you are coordinating a number of courses, you have a lot of things in your mind. And yet the most important thing is, of course, the student learning. And so it's great to get some feedback or help with, what kind of technology can I use? And which brings me to the question about, I know Swinburne has got a partnership with Adobe.
Yes, with Adobe.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking about that's another interesting project that I'm collaborating with my colleagues on as well, is developing Swinburne's digital literacies program, and Swinburne has a partnership with Adobe as a creative campus. So one of the projects is each semester academics who receive an Adobe Innovation Grant produce resources for other teachers to use. So these might include, say, a set of marking criteria in the form of a rubric, or rubric for students who are creating things or for their technical use of some technology. Or they might be creating a set of project instructions or a lesson plan for other teachers to use. And there have also been some interactive learning activities that are created using augmented reality through the innovation grants. So to support this, my colleagues and I have developed exemplars for academics to then use and rework to present their own resources. So they use these exemplars and rework them.
Right.
But we help them with creating them and writing them up in a way that is friendly and easy for other teachers to be able to pick up and run with themselves, because they're shareable resources. So they all sort of have a similar voice, and teachers can compare. Teachers who want to pick them up and run with them can compare them easily. But what I can do is I can share the link to the Adobe Education Exchange where we house all these resources. So if your listeners are really interested in having a look at or even using them, then they're more than welcome to.
Natasha, do you think, I mean, I don't know about here in Australia, but I do know in Europe and particularly in Sweden, there is a bit of fear among teachers, especially in higher education, that technology will replace them in the classroom. What do you think?
This is such an interesting question, Lisa. And I'm going to say off the top of my head, no, I don't think that at all. But I do know one of my colleagues, Yvonne Newell, who I was talking to just before this, she recently answered this question as an assignment in her learning design course that she's been studying. So I know it's topical, philosophical question, and it could be answered with a whole heap of research. But I suppose if I think of some of the conversations that I've had with teachers and academics, even just in the last couple of weeks, we've essentially been talking about social learning and the modelling of human interactions. So, for instance, if I think about podcasts, which we're doing now, a couple of teachers are considering asking their students to create a podcast. One of these disciplines is science, and the academic believes that it's going to be important for her students to not only be able to talk about immunology scientifically, but also be able to communicate it to non-scientists, specifically regarding, what's topical at the moment, which is vaccinations, for instance. And another discipline, if I think about, is marketing, and an academic in marketing is wanting her students to learn all forms of media, which is including podcasts. But what the conversations that I've had with both these people have been around the need for the teachers to actually model the type of communications that's required for the podcast. So say what's the appropriate tone, the language, the balance between scientific jargon and more accessible jargon for a more general audience. Or for marketing students who are eventually going to have to engage with industry partners, there's a need for those students who haven't been exposed to the Australian marketing industry to see how you'd approach and ask questions of a market leader. So this teacher is actually going to do an interview with an industry partner, not just to provide the insights and the information for the students, but also to subtly set the right tone and the environment for future learning and communication within the industry for those students. So I think that socially constructed learning and bouncing ideas off each other and modelling a variety of skills that are required for employment and for learning is not something that I can see technology easily replacing. Technology certainly enhances that, can amplify it, and has a lot of scope. But as a side facilitator to that,
I look at technology as a support. It's a tool that we
yeah,
use.
yeah,
And part of digital literacy, if you like, is to understand how you can integrate technology in what you do, or in, sharing information, or, it depends on who you are as a teacher. And this, of course, brings to the next question, which is, how do you activate and engage teachers in learning?
yeah. Well, just to take it a step back, Lisa, what you're saying there, yeah, I'm just thinking about how I've answered the previous questions, and I spoke about the digital literacies program, but I've actually not really spoken that much about technology, I suppose, so far. So even though I use and support teachers in the use of technology every day, I really, my approach is that the technology supports student learning, and it's something that the students might need to know how to use, but it doesn't replace teachers. But it is exciting that technology does open up education to people who might not have been able to access it previously. So particularly for Australia, which is such a large, vast country, there might be students that live regionally, or even students who are balancing other priorities and so forth as well, that technology helps. I think really to support and engage teachers who are really smart people and don't take things at face value. By right, they do question directives and suggestions and choices of technology that we might have, and question the need to learn more as well, because they're so busy. Um, so if I think about the workshop that you came to, Lisa, you might remember. Do you remember being asked before you came to the workshop what you wanted to get out of it?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so you had to fill out a form, and most people who fill out that form say they wanted new ideas or to learn about new
Yep.
tools. So answering those questions for teachers is really important for being able to engage teachers in learning. Being able to give them what they want. But there was actually one response to that particular workshop that really stood out to me, and that was that this person wanted real advice with evidence, justification, and wanted that to be backed up by real world examples. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, that whoever sent that
Mm.
response, they're absolutely right. And teachers deserve that in their professional development. So I do aim to do that, to engage teachers by basically getting to the point and offering evidence-based solutions for what is going to work for them. And that's coupled with, I hope, my relationship building skills and trust. So I've been at Swinburne now for 2.5 years. And most of that time has actually been working from home. So it's hard to know whether I've developed some relationships, if I would have developed those relationships quicker had I been on campus, or maybe because it's been such an intense experience of rapidly adapting to fully online teaching, I've met teachers that I might not have otherwise worked with. But I do get the sense that I'm just now getting to know who's who, and who works with who, which is so important for networking and being able to develop those relationships, trust, and then being able to help with professional development as well. It's really nice to be back on campus and to meet people face to face like we got to
Yes.
last week.
What were your challenges during the pandemic? And then how has it changed now that you're back?
Well, do you know what? Probably have to give that. It's such an interesting question. I could go in so many different directions. My mind's racing everywhere. Lisa, you've got me. Um, But maybe for your Swedish listeners, they may or may not know that Melburnians had one of the longest lockdowns in the world. It was a hugely challenging time, but it also kept the COVID numbers low, so that we could get vaccinated. And I think the other important point is that our international and state borders were closed, and this had quite a profound implication for international students who are a significant part of our student cohort and student body as well. So, and those things you probably need to know that context as well. But now we're a highly vaccinated population, and we're back on campus. And being someone who genuinely cares about people, I do sense that there's excitement on behalf of some teachers who have been able to embrace the technology, and they're keen to continue, and that's great. And on the other hand, there's also fatigue, because a lot of teachers, they had to reorganise their units, create new assessments, figure out how to organise student group work online, and how students could access the tools, the software, and all of that. So there, obviously, in doing that, there are so many opportunities. So in all the work that's been done, there's some great advantages in online learning: increased access for some students, the creation of those resources, videos, games, interactive, asynchronous ways of learning. But now we're back on campus. It does make sense to harness all of this and what's best in both worlds, online, face-to-face learning. But I personally think, teachers are human, and I can't help thinking that some people might need to catch their breath. So I'll just wait for that car to go past there, so it doesn't make it. Yeah.
And let's not forget, the pandemic is really not over yet. We are just living with it.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, over and above this, we're calling it post-pandemic, but more people in Australia are getting sick now and have been unwell with COVID this year than they have been before. Right. And many teaching staff are off, and students have had to take time off as well. I've had to isolate with different children that have been unwell myself. So I don't know that we're really calling this post-pandemic yet. Yeah. But over and above that, I suppose some other challenges that we have, we've got great tools and software, but we need to remember that not all students can access them. Right. And even if they can, at the moment, they might need some training to use them effectively. And this can be a challenge, particularly if people are isolating. And I think another challenge is, and these are challenges before, during, and since as well, is that sometimes we have limited time with teachers, and they might come to workshops and say that they've tried something, say a tool or an assessment type, and it didn't work, or students didn't like it. And that might be the end of the conversation because of that limited time. And I find this a challenge, particularly because I would like to dig a little bit deeper and have the chance to be able to look at why something didn't work, because it could be as simple as students might not have known how to use that technology. Case in point, if I think about it, I'm actually studying at the moment, I'm doing a fabulous subject called Developing Inclusive Learning and Teaching Practice, which is part of the Graduate Certificate of Learning and Teaching at Swinburne. I'm loving it. But just to keep things a bit separate for me, I've been using the Canvas app on my phone away from my desk. So Canvas is the learning management system that we use at Swinburne. And so when it came to my group work assignment and meeting other students who are generally teachers that I was going to work with, there was a set of written instructions for how to get into the groups area in Canvas. And that actually didn't apply to the Canvas app. It only applied to the desktop version. Now, I quickly worked it out, but it was a small blocker for me, but such a blocker could prevent other students or people from either finding their group and actually disengaging with the course. Yeah. So it could be just something as simple as instructions.
What do you think is next in the world of technology or technological tools? One of the problems might be that the choices are overwhelming.
That's true. There is so much out there, and it's hard. And I think that's actually can be difficult for the students if you think from a student perspective as well, if every teacher is using a different sort of technology. So that if they're doing, say, 4 units, and every teacher has got a different form of communication with them, or a different form of communicating with each other, or suggesting even, say in group work, there's different ways of connecting through groups. But then maybe that simulates what is happening in the real world. You do need to be over all these different forms of communication now. I think each discipline's probably different. Yeah, so that's really, yeah, it is interesting. I don't actually have if I had to choose, I don't think I could ever actually choose one form of technology over another.
Mm. I do have
Yes.
one, and that's podcasting.
Okay. And is that because you really enjoy listening to podcasts?
Yes, because you can listen when you're walking, you can be out with the dog, you can be out shopping, although I don't suggest that you worry about podcasting, listening to podcasts when you shop or when you drive. But, I think podcasting is fantastic. I integrate podcast in all my lectures.
Yeah, it is. It is a fantastic way for students to learn as well, because yeah, you can listen and you can be doing other things as well. So that, yeah, is.
I just think podcasting is a great fun way. And I actually listen to your podcast and I think you're
Thank you.
fabulous.
They were great fun to do, and I learnt a lot as well. So I never knew how to use the technology, but it was all self-taught. So yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot of, I mean, when I was doing those podcasts, there was a lot of fear as well. It was actually, I had to really, step up and go, okay, I can tackle this technology. The software looked really difficult, and I had to take it down, to make it, put it into bite-sized bits, and learn how to edit and get some help and ask people. And so if we're asking students to create podcasts, to do anything, you need to understand that, it can be something completely new. I would always avoid aligning myself with any one tool or any one mode, because every situation is different, and different
Yes.
disciplines are different, and they have different needs as well. So I wouldn't want to be someone who just looked at podcasts and didn't offer or provide support or suggestions in other areas as well. I think I would be doing a disservice to the students if I was going to do that. But I think it's the way that you use the technology. So if there's a problem and there's a challenge, then it's why do you need to use podcasts, and what might this achieve for the learning objectives? A video might be better. So I wouldn't bend learning so that you could just use a particular mode or a particular sort of technology. I would go the other way around. The technology supports the learning.
Yes, a lot of times we think back to into the classrooms, and you used to put on the video for students, the television, put the video.
Yeah.
So that was like, the highlight of technology use. But anyway, listen, it's absolutely wonderful to talk to you. But what is next for you, Natasha? You're next.
What's next for me? Well,
Yep.
interesting question, Lisa. I have been pondering on that myself. I've been a learning designer for nearly 3 years now, and I suppose that's been just enough time now to really understand the nuances of the job. But there's still a lot more for me to learn. So I really do enjoy this role. And as I said at the start, it's really the perfect fit for me. So I would say more of the same, including continually learning and exploring ways to really enhance students' learning experiences. I really enjoy thinking about that and supporting teachers in that. So I hope I have the opportunity to support more academics and maybe even look at some research as well, and supporting the research. I'm not a researcher or a scholar myself. I'm a learning designer, but I do think it's important to keep abreast of all the educational technology advances, all the research in pedagogy and learning and teaching. So I enjoy doing that. So yeah, it might not sound so glamorous, but I really do find this role of support really fulfilling.
So is there anything that comes to your mind that you want to bring up and share with our listeners?
Yeah, actually there is. So when I was studying learning design leadership at Deakin, my lecturer, Associate Professor Chia Dache, suggested that I get onto Twitter, and I have actually found some fabulous scholars and researchers in digital learning to follow, and I'm often recommending people use Twitter and read the works of these people. So, for instance, Associate Professor of Practice Mahabali, she's an excellent blogger and posts regularly on Twitter. I always enjoy and look at what she's posted. And I suppose you've asked me quite a bit about the future of things, Lisa, and I would like to say that the last 3 years there have been so many changes. All I can really do is speculate. So it'll be interesting, and it's exciting to think that what is going to happen in this space in the future. I'll be looking forward to that.
And just when you mentioned Twitter, that is a different way of also using Twitter as a tool.
Yes.
And the information. So, and this is great that you so generously have been sharing your ideas. And this is what I think, I think it's great if you find something that you particularly enjoy. I never really got into Twitter.
Well, I can't say that I am a little bit Twitter shy, I think, at the moment, because I am learning so much from the amazing researchers and academics that are on Twitter. I haven't posted so much, but I think as I gain more experiences, I'll have more opinions to share, and I look forward to that, to sharing more. But it really is I feel like I'm in a community of practice, but at the start of a community of practice, I think a lot of people are at the side and looking in, but I'm definitely getting a lot out of that community of practice that is on Twitter and the social learning that's going on there.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for sharing about your work, and it has been absolutely lovely speaking with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Lisa. It's wonderful to speak to you too.
And you have been listening to the podcast Sånt är livet i Sverige, or in English, That's Life in Sweden, with me, Lisa Åsemäki. And of course, I'm not podcasting from Sweden because I am currently in Melbourne here in Australia, where I will be doing a few more recordings and interviews with fascinating academics and researchers. But till next time, take care of yourself and each other's. Bye for now.